Hello and welcome to Talking City. I'm James Robson, Manchester City editor for the Manchester Evening News.
And I'm Ian Cheeseman, once of the BBC, 23 years as a City reporter, now at XS Manchester.
Pep Guardiola was brought in to make City champions of Europe, ultimately. We've had the Champions League draw. Having been involved in so many groups of death down the years, this one looks like, well, let's just say, a far more comfortable draw, doesn't it? I know there's going to be difficult games in that, but this is one that I don't think they've had one as comfortable as this, have they?
On paper, no. I mean, obviously starting at Feyenoord is a real test. I think I'd have preferred the Feyenoord to be the away game at the end of the group, because I think going there as the first match in the group with the intensity of what I know the Dutch crowd will perform, and I've not been in the stadium, but I've been past it, and it's like it's a really bowl-shaped stadium, and I can imagine it'll be quite intense in there. But I think Feyenoord, like Ajax, if you remember from a few years ago when they played them, were very beatable, or should be very beatable, so I don't particularly see them as a problem. A lot will be made out of the fact that Shakhtar, who are playing, of course, not on their home ground, but nevertheless a long way away. It's south of Moscow, so that gives you an idea, and it'll be in cold weather in December. Will be very tiring for players, the long journey, and certainly for the supporters it's a challenge.
The idea is that will be a dead rubber, isn't it?
The idea is that that's a dead rubber. So I think that one's fine, because in theory they're through already by then, and they do play them at home, and quite early on, and I think that's a good winnable game. The toughest game's obviously going to be the back-to-back against Napoli, and it was interesting at the press conference when Pep was asked about that he highlighted that immediately and said they were he said one of the best three teams in Europe, which I thought was quite a strong thing to say. So I presume he means Real Madrid, Barcelona,
or City.
And Napoli. So that is quite a strong thing to say, really. Let's see if they are. I mean, I was there when City played Napoli last time, and we again know that the Italians produce an intense atmosphere. It shouldn't make any difference in theory to the players, but it does somehow. So I think those two games are going to be the key to the group, the back-to-back games.
Yeah, I think Pep was referring to Napoli playing the best football in Europe, other than these other two clubs, we can assume Real Madrid and Barcelona. Whether that makes you the best team is another thing entirely, isn't it? I remember last year him saying Bournemouth were the best team they'd played against after City beating 4-0. So we know that he appreciates the aesthetics, and if they are that type of team who play not Bournemouth football, but you get my point, if they're a more easy on the eye team, those sort of teams suit Pep more, don't they?
That's a fair point. I mean, the way that Arsenal play, for example, is always good for the way City play, whereas playing Chelsea...
And vice versa, actually, isn't it?
Yeah. Whereas playing Chelsea, the classic... certainly the way they were moulded under Jose Mourinho, the classic defensive counter-attacking team, City do sometimes struggle with that a little bit. Good quality counter-attacking teams. And he did say, Pep that is, that Napoli were not the model of the cliched Italian team. So you're right really in what you're saying. It'll be fascinating to see if they are really good as well as playing in the way that is aesthetically pleasing.
See, for me, the disappointment when I was watching the draw was that
it lasted so long.
That definitely was I look forward to, as a fan, when these draws come out, I look forward to those big games. I know that City were very frustrated for a long time. City fans were frustrated about getting drawn in these groups of death, and it was to do with the seedings and what have you. And there was certainly that didn't seem fair, did it? But I think you look forward to playing Bayern Munich, to playing last season against Barcelona. Yeah, they got thrashed at the Nou Camp, but they thrashed Barca at the Etihad, and that provided memories that I think there'll be lots of fans who they'll never forget those. I remember one fan was talking to me, and they said they were texting. They were texting someone about the score for whatever reason they couldn't watch it, and they were saying, so I got a text and it was we've beaten Barcelona. Was Messi playing? Yeah. Was Suarez playing? Yeah. Was Neymar playing? Yeah. And what did we win? 3-1. Yeah. It's a memory that they'll never forget. It was amazing. And when you get those groups and there isn't that game, I just think it seems like a bit of a drudge up until the new year. But if you get through, who cares?
Yeah, I suppose I could see that point of view. I mean, I've seen one or two City fans say, that group doesn't really excite me. I don't think I'll bother. I'll wait until the latter stages.
That's dangerous.
That is dangerous, but it costs a lot of money. I suppose they're talking really about the away games rather than the home games. And it does become, and isn't it nice, certainly from my point of view, as a long-time City fan, to actually be able to say, the group stage isn't that exciting, because a few years ago City would have killed to be in the group stage of a Champions League, but now it's becoming a little bit more routine, which is part of the development of the club, that games like this are no longer, we're playing Barcelona today, wow, and just playing them is enough. Now it's a case of, we need to get a result against them, get through the group stage, get to the next leg, which is great for the way that the club is developing. As a fan, looking at it purely from a fan perspective, I'm still excited by this group because Napoli are a rising team, or it feels that way to me anyway, and especially after what Pep said, I'm looking forward to watching them. I've never seen Shakhtar Donetsk before. The Ukrainians may play in a slightly different way, and Feyenoord, especially the away game, will have that intense atmosphere. So I don't think this is by any means a dull group. I think it's a really exciting group, but maybe it would have been nice to have had just one of those really, but maybe Napoli, that team, one of those really big clubs. I mean, if Napoli, and they weren't that far away, they'd have won the Italian league last year, they'd have been in pot one. If they'd have been more successful over a longer period of time, they'd have been in maybe pot two arguably, and then they wouldn't have drawn City, I know. But what I'm saying is it wouldn't be out of the question in a different year for Napoli to have been seen as a real cherry in that cake.
Guardiola will
cherry
be...
in that cake. Cherry on that cake.
Cherry on the cake, yeah. Guardiola, he will make sure there's no complacency, won't he? And I think that was probably a big thing behind what he was saying about them being the third best team in Europe. I think back to last year when the draw was made and they got Monaco. And I remember, ignorantly myself, admittedly, and I think a lot of fans felt the same, was that's a real plum draw. That's about as good as it could get.
Absolutely how it was seen.
And I think I know that we knew Monaco were doing well in the French league, but I think we were probably a bit ignorant to how strong that Monaco team was, or how strong the French league was for that Monaco team to be leading it. So I suppose that is the danger, isn't it? Don't look at this as in, we're going to walk through this.
Yeah, I mean, Celtic, of course, last year looked like an easy one as well, to be honest. And I think the intensity, and this is the point I'm making about Feyenoord, the intensity of the game up at Celtic Park, and it was a tremendous atmosphere, and I don't think City saw that coming, and they ended up with this 3-3 draw. Now, it didn't do any harm in the end, but nevertheless, if you're caught off guard by it, you're concentrating on Napoli in the two games against them. You're taking maybe Shakhtar as fans, not necessarily Pep, taking Shakhtar as a gimme game. Well, that's the 3 points. So Feyenoord, we go there, we get a point, set things up nicely. You get beat in the game, and suddenly you're a little bit on the back foot, aren't you? Then you've got to beat Shakhtar to set up the two games back to get back against Napoli. So I don't think anything should be underestimated. I think this is a tough group, and Feyenoord in their own stadium will be a real challenge for Pep Guardiola's side.
Three games in, undefeated, 7 points. Happy?
Pretty much. Obviously 9 would have been even better.
That's what Pep said.
Within the performances, there have been some great moments, I think. Particularly enjoyed the latter part of the first half at Bournemouth, when City really played some beautiful football, very much Pep style. However, there were moments in that game too that weren't ideal either, where they were under the cosh. There was only a brief spell at Brighton where most of the time they were just parking the bus and camped in their own half, Brighton, so it was just a case of whether they could break them down or not. But there was a little moment where City looked a little bit shaky, maybe at the back. And obviously Everton, although there were mitigating circumstances, that game had its ups and downs as well, I thought. It's hard sometimes when you just watched a game that involves sending off like the Kyle Walker incident to really have a rational view of the game, because you're involved in the emotion of it. I mean, certainly when I talk to fans after the game, and these days I do a vlog, Forever Blue, if you want to look it up on YouTube, that people, of course, come out of the game so full of emotion, so full of adrenaline, that is all they want to talk about, and the perceived agenda that referees or whoever you want to name really have it in for City. And whilst I have some sympathy for that, and obviously we know that I think most people would agree that the Kyle Walker incident was just ridiculous, it doesn't mean that you should forget the 90 minutes of football that have happened. So for a big chunk of that game, yes, City were down to 10 men and actually got back into it, and arguably could have, even with 10 men, won the game. But there were also little slight worries. That said, again, it's 3 games, and how many times down the years have the ultimate champions lost one of the opening 3 games or not played the best football? Most of the time the team that ends up winning the Premier League gets stronger as the season goes along, and I believe City will get stronger as the season goes along. So therefore, the fact it's only 7 from 9.
Only.
Yeah. Well, you've got to aim for perfection, haven't you? These days it's, look at when Chelsea won that league title, where I know Arsenal had the Invincibles year, and Chelsea did lose that season, but they were pretty much winning every game. There was very little room for error, and I think it'll be like that again this year. I think.
I get the feeling Guardiola agrees with that, because I don't feel like there's been any point this season after a match where he's seemed particularly happy. Now, he's a perfectionist, isn't he? So he sees things that probably we don't, that he's not happy with. I'm gonna take the other point of view here. I would look at it and say, yeah, I don't think there's been a point this season where City have looked amazing, let's say, have looked like the side that we think they're going to become. But I think they've answered so many questions within that already. I think the Brighton game last season, I think they could have drawn. I think that chance that Brighton have just before City actually take the lead, that probably goes in last season. And then what happens? I think against Everton, like you say, everything went against them. The Kyle Walker should never have been sent off. They were totally dominating the game, and then Wayne Rooney scores. Of all people, Wayne Rooney scores. And he managed to get a draw out of it. And then at Bournemouth, 7 minutes into stoppage time, Bournemouth had broken away and looked like they were going to score the winner, and City win the game. I think in each of those games, there are hallmarks you could see there of a side that's going to win the title, of a side that, when you look back, you'll say, how important was that draw against Everton? How important was that late win against Bournemouth? Now, you look at City fans probably looked at those 3 fixtures and thought, maybe Everton side, we should roll over those teams. Well, it doesn't work like that. But what they have done is they've got 3 points against Brighton, 3 points against Bournemouth away from home, which other teams probably will drop points there.
All good points. I mean, Brighton, as the season goes along, might end up being one of the fall guys and might end up getting relegated. But playing them on the opening day of the season, and I know mosaic doesn't win you the game, but that fantastic mosaic that they had at the beginning of the game and the atmosphere that they generated meant that their team was probably more up for that game, had less to lose in that game than they might do later on in the season. So that wasn't a foregone conclusion, even though in the end Brighton might suffer quite heavy defeats at home. Bournemouth had started with 2 defeats, so they were desperate to get something out of that game.
And
so
you could tell, couldn't you?
You could see it, and absolutely, and everything. And they're a decent side in the Premier League. And again, it's a small stadium. They're on their own patch. Maybe the game up at the Etihad will be different against both Brighton and Bournemouth. But those are 2 away games to start the season. We're not gimme games. And Everton, with their manager, who is a big mate of Pep, obviously they were together at one stage in their careers as players, probably has a little bit more inside knowledge and of how he can get at a Pep Guardiola team.
We saw that last year,
which is why I think Everton have become a little bit of a bogey team, if you like. So three tricky games to get going with. They've got very good points that you've made about that mentality of getting a winner in the last few seconds, of ultimately breaking down a team like Brighton and battling back in adversity, even though the world's against you, it feels, against Everton. So they're all good indicators of what could come. So now they've got to go out against Liverpool in the next game.
It gets harder now, doesn't it? That's the problem.
Yeah, and produce again now. So I'm pretty confident that they will do that, because I think this is going to be a great season for City. But I still would have preferred 9 from the first 9.
So that Liverpool game, that is the next game. That is a real test, isn't it? Because Liverpool... On a high. They looked... Defensively, they looked shocking still. That Watford game really showed that, didn't it? But going forward, they're the sort of team who can get at City. They'll be the biggest test to City's defence so far, won't they?
Well, there's another thing as well. Klopp obviously was a manager in the Bundesliga and went against Pep Guardiola. And you might argue, because I'm a big fan of Jurgen Klopp, not just because of his personality, which is very likeable, but also the way he set his team up, particularly at Dortmund, and he's now starting to do that with Liverpool. And I think his type of style is not massively different to Pep's. And if it hadn't have been Pep that had come into City, I wouldn't have been at all against Jurgen Klopp coming in. So these two matching up against each other is always going to be interesting. And I think Jurgen Klopp's the type of manager who will make his players believe that they can come to the Etihad and win. Great, because that makes it a better game. So this will be a really... I cannot wait for this game against Liverpool.
It's a sort of game that there could be loads of goals. It could be 3-3, couldn't it? It could be 4-3.
People said that though about the Arsenal-Liverpool game. This could be anything, 4-3 and everything. And we know what happened in that one.
So you're predicting a 4-0 defeat?
No, I'm saying sometimes when you expect a lot of goals, it doesn't happen. But yeah, I'd like to see a 4-3 City win. I'd love that.
The game at the Etihad last season between these two sides was a brilliant game, wasn't it?
Yeah,
But that only ended, it was 1-1, wasn't it?
Liverpool won, didn't they?
No, it was a 1-1 draw, wasn't it?
Was it 1-1 draw?
At the Etihad, yeah. Liverpool won at Anfield.
Oh yeah.
It was a draw at the Etihad. I think Guardiola
right.
say it was the greatest result of his life.
Yeah.
That was that.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. Liverpool last season. I mean, Everton obviously were another tricky team for City, but Liverpool felt to me as if they were, domestically anyway, the sort of toughest opponents that they played. It didn't turn out that way in positionally, if you like, although City were third and Liverpool were fourth, so there wasn't a lot between them. But in terms of City's enjoyment of a game, if you can enjoy a game when you're a passionate supporter, that was the one I'd look at and say, those two games against Liverpool would be two of the most enjoyable games. So yeah, I suppose that's one of the reasons I'm really looking forward to it.
We've seen two different formations from Guardiola over the 3 games so far this season. I know it changes frequently throughout the game, but in terms of starting formation, is there one that you're more comfortable with at the moment?
I'm not a fan of 3 at the back, I'll be honest, although again it's arguable, is it 3 at the back, is it 5 at the back, and it changes in games. But I mean, I've heard a lot of people questioning John Stones playing in that central role, or what does he contribute, and I have a certain amount of sympathy for that, because he's seen, I suppose, as a free player in that role. If you're going to play a free player in that role, who's going to play between the two spread out centre backs, then why not play, as he sort of did, I suppose, at Bournemouth, Fernandinho or Yaya Toure, or maybe Gundogan, or maybe in the long run Kevin De Bruyne, who knows, but play a player like that in that role who can, I know some people will say, well, you can't have somebody playing in that role who's not a defender, who's not defensive minded. Why not? This is a long time ago now, and not everybody will remember this, but Franz Beckenbauer, who started as the original sweeper, was a great footballer. And whilst I suppose in theory that's what the role John Stones is playing, at this stage, and I know he's only young and he can develop, but at this stage, John Stones hasn't got that vision, hasn't got that, he can't join in the attacks in the way that a player like Beckenbauer could do. So I could see Yaya Toure
Sounds
doing
perfect
that.
for Toure, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And Fernandinho to a point, Gundogan, as I say, maybe. And Pep's done this at other clubs. You saw what he did with Philipp Lahm at Bayern Munich. You know,
Played him everywhere but in goal.
Yeah, but I mean, he ostensibly was a fullback,
Yeah.
but he converted him into a completely different type of player. What's to say that Pep, I'm not saying he's going to do this, but throws in, you know, one from the bottom of the deck a little bit and goes, right, well, Kevin De Bruyne is going to be my libero, my man in that. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows what
There are
could
signs of
happen?
that, aren't there? Because he's moved De Bruyne around already, hasn't he? He's playing him deeper than De Bruyne has in the past. I'm not convinced De Bruyne's overly happy with that, but when you look at the attacking midfielder options that Guardiola's got, just because De Bruyne is capable of dropping deeper, it feels more like that might be where he ends up to me.
Kevin De Bruyne, when he was playing in Germany, was playing as almost as an out and out right winger. He wanted to play more centrally and maybe drift out wide. But I'm not saying necessarily every word that Phil Neville says I agree with, but on Match of the Day last week, he highlighted the fact that De Bruyne carrying the ball out from a deeper position, that his range of passing and his accuracy was so good that he was the perfect man to play in that position. He actually illustrated this belief by showing a misplaced pass by Kevin De Bruyne, which made me laugh a little bit because it went behind Sergio Aguero as 3 players ahead of De Bruyne broke free. But I do agree with what Neville was saying there, and I do think that De Bruyne is capable generally of that. That's why I think Yaya Toure is also perfect in that role. And there will be times, I'm sure, where he will play Yaya in that role, perhaps in the games either side of a Champions League or in the League Cup or something. But I don't see any reason why Gundogan or De Bruyne can't play in that. So then people will say, well, that's not a back three.
Well, who's winning the ball is my only thought there. If you look at his great
Yeah, but
Barcelona team,
you know Pep's philosophy though is not about winning the
Keeping
ball,
it.
because he said, you know, a couple of times, and maybe this quote's exaggerated, but nevertheless he has said, I don't teach tackling, we don't do that, because his whole philosophy is that you intercept the ball or you keep possession. And whilst John Stones isn't an out-and-out tackler, as Otamendi perhaps is, or to a certain extent Vincent Kompany is, he is maybe an interceptor. So, you know, that role can be certainly fulfilled by Gundogan or Yaya Toure or De Bruyne or whatever. So as long as you buy into the whole philosophy of not having a tackling libero, then any of those players could play in that role in theory.
Busquets is pretty good at winning the ball, though, isn't he? And he's pretty fundamental.
Mascherano was more of a tackler. Busquets was more of an interceptor, wasn't he?
I suppose I was going to mention Mascherano as well.
Yeah.
Another good tackler. So he doesn't mind. He doesn't mind those players. Does he?
And he's got them. I mean, I know some fans haven't always been big on Nicolas Otamendi, and maybe he does go to ground a little bit more often than he should do. But I like him. He's an old-fashioned centre back whose whole persona is about trying to win the ball. So you've got one of them there. Vincent Kompany might not be quite in the, you know, come on, let's have him type mould as Otamendi, but in his own way, that's what he is as well.
Yeah.
So you've got 2 of those already. Do you need 3? I don't know. That's the question. And does there need to be a central one of those 3? Maybe.
So you're not including John Stones then in this?
No, he's not a tackler. He's certainly not of that mould of those 2 either side of him.
And he's not the ball player of a Toure, let's say, or
No,
or a Gundogan.
not at the moment.
Thanks to Ian for joining us for another episode of Talking City. We'll be back very soon.